study of yoga brings us to an immediate point which requires clarification. We do not advocate that the Western person attempt the acceptance of yoga disciplines exactly as they are taught in the East. The reasons for our feelings are good and sufficient. Most of all, the basic difference in the Eastern and Western psychology of living. And there is no subject in which inconsistencies can be more dangerous than in this particular type of advanced philosophic thinking. On the other hand, there are principles involved which are universal. And not only does increase of knowledge depend upon an estimation of these principles, but our entire ethical and social life must in time include a clear comprehension of the Eastern life way, without which we can never hope for a global concept of living or the final solution of East-West problems. So what we want to do primarily is to explore similarities and differences without any accusations, without any criticisms, but trying to point out those Eastern principles which are useful, necessary to the development of Western life. Most of you have some general knowledge of this subject. Therefore, we will limit our preliminary remarks as much as possible. We know that the term yoga means union, and that the yogas, variously taught and named in India, and the same principles under other names in the religious philosophies of other Near Eastern and Far Eastern peoples, that the yogas represent disciplines of union, that they represent means for man's internal re-identification with cause, with essence, with being, with reality. We also know that there is a definite difference in the Eastern and Western concept of union. The term can be left without further examination and be meaningful to both. But as we examine more closely, we realize that the religious psychology of the East and West differ as to what constitutes the ultimate attainment by man of his spiritual fulfillment. Western man, in his so-called mystical discipline, drifts toward what may be termed contemplation. Eastern man toward meditation. These are not the same things. Contemplation, as the term generally applies to us, is a person or a being intently experiencing something in relationship to himself. To contemplate, therefore, is to bestow the faculties of self upon some object in the effort to understand it, in the effort to a degree at least to possess it. I think that perhaps we can get something of the perspective by reference to the Canticles of Solomon. In this wonderful song, which is Solomon's, we have a document almost completely the work of some poet or mystic deep in the same spiritual conviction as we find among the Sufis. In the beginning of his love poem, and of course the dark maiden of Jerusalem is wisdom, is the beloved, is truth. Solomon begins with a purely Western contemplative attitude when he says, "My beloved is mine." Me and mine are the pillars of the temple of Western existence. We exist as persons, as individuals. And in our concept of growth, we grow as persons and individuals. We seek to unfold personality and individuality, even going so far as to assume that the selfhood within us is the divine ultimate for us, and that by the perfect expression of self, we achieve to the release of deity through our own natures. This contemplative attitude, then, is that of the mystical observer, who, being in the presence of great or wonderful things, examines them, contemplates them, scrutinizes them, seeks to understand them, and to a measure seeks to impose upon them the understanding which he already possesses. Thus the universe becomes for him a gradual unfoldment of his own expectancy. Seeking he finds, believing he observes the objects of belief fulfilled before him. And in his contemplative mood, he is forever justifying the convictions of his own personal consciousness. He therefore imposes himself upon the universe. He interprets the universe in terms of himself. He experiences universals in terms of personals. And we find this on every level of human thinking among Western peoples. Our Western concept of love is to desire to possess. And our Western acceptance of love is that we are possessed. I've had women come to me in very serious marital problems who complain that their great grievance against their husband was that he was not possessive enough. Now, some may not feel that way, but it does occur. They did not believe he loved them because he did not constantly seek to own or possess, and in this way fulfill an expectancy which is normal, common to Western peoples. Thus, in the Western extension of philosophy and mysticism, we find man reaching out toward a God estate, and a state of rulership, and a state of leadership, and a state of uniting with a power which ordains action, which causes action. Growth of man is therefore from human to superhuman estate, and from that to a divine estate, in which, becoming God-like, he becomes also possessed of the attributes of deity, seeing in the fulfillment of his own nature the release of divine powers through himself. Thus we have in our Western way of life the possibility of the Superman concept, the possibility of recognizing man's infinite potential to grow, and that this growth is always toward the fulfillment of an individual or personal destiny. That man comes finally to knowledge when he understands God, that he achieves truth when he understands truth. Always he is the understanding thing, the unit of awareness, the contemplating power within him, by means of which he can assimilate or accept all knowledge and absorb it into his own nature. Thus he becomes wise, he becomes learned, he becomes skilled, he becomes informed. In the Eastern way of life, however, we have a somewhat different concept, as presented finally also by Solomon in his song. For at the end of the song, after he has experienced something of a more generous or deeper mystical experience within himself, Solomon now sings in a different note, and sings simply the words, I am my beloved. This is a complete change of perspective, and may be, to a degree at least, similar to the Eastern concept of meditation. Meditation is not the individual contemplating infinite. Meditation is the continuous remembrance of a divine reality. It is the individual longing not to become the God, but to return to a godlike condition superior to himself. He no longer seeks to become or to be. He no longer accepts that knowledge will come and be possessed by him. Rather, he regards these great archetypal realities as so vast, so immeasurable, so infinite and ultimate, that he is absorbed by them. Instead of possessing truth, he is possessed by truth. For it is not his own opinion or his own attitude, but the reality which is eternal, immortal, and inevitable. And to the Eastern individual, individuality is separation from reality. And therefore, the search is for re-identification with that which is infinitely beyond the state of selfhood. When we consider these differences, therefore, we realize that they become the basis of a different ethical approach to life. For there is a great deal of difference throughout the career of the individual who wishes to gain and who wishes to give. These express themselves on innumerable levels. They do not pertain entirely to a high religious problem. They are everywhere present in the conduct of our affairs. Therefore, they become a motivating factor on every level of our living. The individual who seeks to become more, or the individual who seeks to be re-identified with that which is eternally more. Attaining all by giving all, rather than by getting all. To live to get has produced Western civilization. To live to give, theoretically, is the fulfillment of the mystical disciplines of the East, to produce what they regard as the perfect or enlightened saint. Now, we must be practical and practical furthermore in the natural statement that the fact that these disciplines, such as yoga, originate among Eastern people does not mean that all Easterners are yogis, nor does it mean that the Eastern world is without many of the defects from which the West suffers and others which belong to its own life way. Therefore, the answer to the simple question is, these things are better, why are not the people better?